41. Joey. It'd been 2 weeks since I had come to New York. 2 whole weeks of living with Alex, and holy shit, he was busy. I had found myself going into nagging mode at least twice, when I found him not resting after he'd been attacked, but in the end, I had just thrown my hands up and told him if he injured himself again, not to come crying to me. That had been met with a chuckle, a kiss, and a see you for dinner. Now I was sitting in the living room, staring at the wall, trying not to be bored out of my brain. Alex had left for work almost an hour ago, promising me he'd be back for lunch, but I knew he wouldn't. Yuka had found a lead on who had stabbed Alex, and the man was like a dog with a bone. Soda had filled me in on what little he could, but in the end, I'd learned I didn't really want to know what Alex was up to and who he was chasing. All I wanted to be sure of was that he was safe. I shifted in the armchair and tipped my head back, looking at the ceiling. I'd already cleaned the house from the bottom floor to the top. Not that it needed it. There was a cleaner who came in once a week. I'd sticky-beaked through everything I could get my hands on and had realized Alex led a very simple, very lonely life, not unlike my own. I needed something to do. Picking myself up off the armchair, I walked into the hallway and picked up my handbag and the spare key Alex had cut for me and left the house. I couldn't stay cooped up. Not today. Nor could I keep letting Alex pay for things, even if he told me he had more than enough money to cover things. With my last few $100s, I would go out, get something for dinner, and find myself a job. Alex had said I could stay as long as I liked. I wasn't a mooch. I would pay my own way. 2 hours later, I had been to the hospital and scored myself some part-time work, starting the following week, and I was currently cruising down one of the aisles of Trader Joe's, my basket laden with fresh produce for dinner. "Hey, pretty lady." I blinked and stopped, turning to the voice. At the end of the aisle was a trio of men, watching me. Normally, I'm fairly friendly. Being a nurse, you have to have a pleasant demeanor. But something about this trio had my skin crawling, and I turned, not even saying hello. Quickly walking to the front of the store, I piled my groceries onto the counter and looked back to the aisle, seeing the men still watching me, but they had gotten closer, and the looks on their faces told me they didn't have the purest of intentions. I bounded from one foot to the other as the elderly woman rang up my purchases, and I paid. Picking up the bag, I turned and left the store, turning toward home. The sun was starting to dull, bringing in the signal of the day's end. My feet pounded on the sidewalk as I hurried, and I turned my head looking back toward the store. Shit! They were following me. Shit, shit, shit! If I could have run, I would have. But the bag of groceries which was resting heavily in my arms was the last of my money. I seriously considered abandoning them, but my stubbornness took over. I'd paid for those groceries with the money I'd earned. A wolf whistle, and I turned my head again. There were now 5 of them, and the scariest part, they weren't in a hurry. They just seemed to be meandering down the street, as if they knew exactly where I was going and knew they would head me off at some point. I mean, they probably would. My chunky ass and the heavy grocery bag would be weighing me down, and I would soon grow tired of the pace I was trying to keep. I knew my limitations. My heart started to beat heavier in my chest, my stomach contracting with the idea I might not make it back to the house, and that the next time Alex might see me would be to identify my body after they pulled it from the alley. Fuck's sake, stop it. I hissed at myself, moving my hand, and I dug into my handbag, pulling out my phone. Juggling the groceries, I dialed Alex. It picked up after the first ring. "Hey, doll, how far are you from home?" I asked, my breath coming in gasps. Alex must have picked up on it, because his tone changed. "Joey, are you okay? What's going on?" I went out for groceries and, well, I'm on 3rd Avenue, just around the corner from Trader Joe's." I turned my head, looking back to the group. They noticed me on the phone, and one of them gestured to another, who started to walk faster toward me, as if trying to catch me. "There's a group of men following me." "What kind of men? Describe them to me." I looked back again, focusing on the one who seemed to be the leader. Asian, leathers, and blue jeans. They have a red tiger on the cuff of their sleeves. Fuck, Soda, step on it. I was a little less than 5 blocks from Alex's house, and I knew my stamina would run out by the time I got even halfway there. The groceries were getting heavier and heavier with each step. I could hear Soda on the other end of the phone, swearing. "Just keep going, Joey. We're almost there." The screech of tires, and I turned my head, seeing Soda's sedan barreling down the street, coming up from behind the men. It pulled to a stop between me and the group, and Alex climbed out of the car. He ignored the group, who had stopped and were watching us, instead turning to me, his gaze full of concern and anger. "Jolene, get in the car." I nodded and hurried back to Alex as he opened the door, and I scurried in. He closed the door behind me, and I peered out of the window as he turned and looked at the men behind him. I was grateful for the still open front door, otherwise I would have driven myself insane, trying to figure out what was being said. "She yours?" someone called out, and I looked up in time to see Alex look down at the window, then back to the group. "Yes, she is. So why don't you just go back to wherever you come from and don't come back?" "On whose authority?" "Huh?" "All we see are two punks trying to steal a pretty white chick." Alex's hand moved and he slipped a freaking gun from under his jacket and held it down next to his leg. Fuck! This might get wild. "How about mine?" I could hear laughter from the group, and I grimaced. I really didn't want to be in a shootout. I'd treated the victims of plenty back in Miami. "And who the fuck are you, pretty boy?" I looked at Alex through the glass and could see him getting frustrated and almost expected him to point the gun and start shooting. I turned my head back to the group as Alex replied. "I am Alexander Kazumi, right-hand man of Yuka Takada. I am telling you to turn your punk asses around and go back to the other side of the tracks before my driver puts a hole in your head." At that statement, Soda finally climbed out of the car, and I watched as the men in the group visibly stepped back. They all looked at each other as Soda raised his arm and placed it on the roof of the car. "Boo!" The group which had been following me scattered. "Fucking pussies!" Soda chuckled, climbing back into the car, and Alex did the same, turning in the seat as Soda took us toward home. There was anger in his gaze, and I shrank a little in the chair. "Are you okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "That was a scouting crew from the Ikeda clan. They've been causing all sorts of trouble in the East Village for the last 2 years. They have a penchant for pretty white girls, and once they get hold of them, they don't come back." I frowned, lowering my gaze, and Alex's hand came out, tilting my chin up. "You have to be more careful around here. We're not in Miami anymore. Okay?" "Okay," I muttered, and he turned back to the front of the car. "Soda, when you've dropped us off, go and have a chat with the security team and see who is suitable to be a driver for Joey. I don't want her wandering around with the Ikeda out and about." "Yes, sir," Soda replied, and I curled up on the back seat, cradling my groceries to my chest as we headed back to Alex's. All I wanted was some independence. 42, Alex. No, I'm not kidding. Holding the phone to my ear, I walked around the kitchen, putting away the groceries Joey had bought with her while she showered. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Oliver. They were Ikeda, and before you ask another stupid question, they had a red tiger on the sleeve of their jackets." When Joey had described the men who were chasing her, I was sickened to my stomach. The Ikeda was a fairly honorable clan, but once you got to the lower echelons of it, the soldiers and the lower-level bosses, well, honor went out the window. They were known for taking pretty white girls and secluding them away in their dirty little whorehouses, and someone like Joey, with her curves and auburn hair, would have been very popular. They're bold, coming so far out of their territory. "Tell me about it." I scrunched up the paper bag and tossed it into the recycling bin. "I'll get Ioto onto more patrols, and I'll step up security at the Dragon, too. Do you want me to let Yuka know?" I stopped and looked at the wall. Shit, I had to tell Yuka. He was the head of the clan. He was the boss, and everything which happened in his territory had to be reported back to him. "No, I will. You know he might want to talk to Jolene about it." Fuck, I sighed, leaning back against the counter, and the angle of my leg made my calf muscles sing. It'd been healing really well and been almost painless. Ow. "You okay?" Ollie asked. "Yeah, just stood wrong," I replied, adjusting my stance. "Look, I know Yuka might want to talk to Joey, but I've been trying to keep her out of this side of my life." There was a bit of a pause before my best friend answered. "Alex, you really think that's an option at the moment? Firstly, she's already met Yuka. Secondly, she patched you up after being stabbed. Thirdly, she's been chased by Ikeda, and they know she's under your protection. She's already into this side of your life. But my suggestion, Oliver continued, is to let her. She is a grown woman, with her own thoughts, I am sure. If she doesn't want anything to do with this life, she will hightail it out of here and never look back. That was what worried me. Joey leaving and never coming back. I know it'd been only 2 weeks she had been staying, and because of the injury to my leg, she'd been in the guest room. But fuck! Right now, if she left, the stability which had come into my life would be gone. You still there? I rolled my eyes and stood, hearing the tap for the shower turn off. Joey was done, and I needed to apologize to her for how I spoke in the car, scaring the shit out of her. Yeah, look, I got to go. I will send Yuka a report tonight about it, and if he wants to chat to Joey, then we'll go from there. No worries. I'll chat to you later. The phone clicked and I turned, in time to see Joey walk past and into the living room. She was wrapped in a fluffy robe, and I looked at my phone, noticing the time. Barely 5 p.m. Yeah, she had been rattled. I needed to get my ass in there and apologize. Turning to the wine fridge, I pulled out a bottle of sweet white, one Joey had become partial to, and poured her a glass, taking it into her. She was curled up on the sofa, a blanket around her shoulders, and was staring off into space. Fuck. What had I done? She was back to her timid, shy, sheltered self. Hey, doll. I ignored the twinge of pain in my leg as I crouched in front of her and held out the wine glass. Peace offering? Joey blinked and looked down at me. Then to the wine. Peace offering? Yeah, I was kind of an overbearing asshole in the car. I shouldn't have told you that shit about the Ikeda. I'm sorry if it frightened you. Joey stared at me, then looked at the glass of wine. She plucked it from my hand and took a sip from it. You didn't frighten me, Alex. I wanted to go out and try and get a job and buy some groceries. I understand what you said. I'm not in Miami anymore. A job? Why would she want a job? She was going to stay a little while longer, sure, but I was happy to cover things. You don't have to get a job, Joey. I'm happy to. Nope, she said, shaking her head. I am not a mooch, Alexander Kazumi. There is no way in hell I am letting you pay for things anymore. I am a grown woman, and I need to pay my own way. I raised an eyebrow and smirked, leaning against the front of the sofa. Well, just moving on in, are you? You said, it's fine. I was kidding. I chuckled, and she slapped my bicep. If you want to get a job, I'm not stopping you, but I won't have you walking around East Village on your own. Soda is organizing a driver for you. A driver? So what, they'll take me to work and back. And everywhere else you want to go. If you want to go back to Miami, then they will go with you too. Think of them like a loyal pit bull. They will be by your side no matter where you go, and they will bite anyone who isn't supposed to go near you. And while I am at work, they will wait for you to message them to come and get you, but if they have your schedule, they will already be waiting. Joey's brows furrowed, and she sipped the wine again. Does Soda go everywhere with you? Pretty much. But he didn't go to Miami. No, he wasn't allowed to. I was the only one from the Takata clan who had permission to go. And boy, had Soda kicked up a stink about me flying to Miami without his protection. I'm glad, though, because we wouldn't have happened if he had have come with me. Oh yes, I am glad for that then, Joey giggled. How is your leg? I looked down to my calf, as if I could peer through the dress pants I was wearing. Not too bad, actually. Little stingy if I move it wrong, but for the most part it's good. Good. Joey put the wine glass to the side and leaned forward, kissing me. Her hands going to my hair, fingernails scraping over my scalp. Think you could handle staying right there and fucking me? On my knees? I asked, kissing down her neck while my hands went to my belt. Fuck yes, I could do that. I'd do whatever she asked me to right now. You bet. Joey moved, her legs coming to either side of my hips, as I shoved down the front of my pants and grabbed her ass, bringing her toward me. Her hands went to the front of the robe, opening it, and I looked down, raising an eyebrow. You're not wearing anything under there? Nope, she replied, gripping my cock as I pulled her closer, and she kissed me again. I was going to try and jump you later, but you're in the perfect position now. My hands gripped Joey's hips as I shoved my cock into her, and she tipped her head back, hands gripping my shoulders, moaning as I started to ram. Fuck, she was still perfect, still so hot and beautiful, and fuck, I wasn't going to last long. The pain of my calf muscle was oddly adding to the pleasure, and I rammed harder, hearing the change in Joey's moans as she started to peak. Oh, Alex. Oh, shit. She just called my name. My brain short-circuited and my cock took over, spurting deep into her as we both released at the same time. Fuck, Joey. I buried my head against her chest as I slowed my movements, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, holding me close. It seemed to take forever for my heart to calm down, but I was okay with this. Lying against her chest, listening to her breathing, feeling her warmth still wrapped around me. I could get used to this. And there lay the problem, because I'd always been taught all good things come to an end. 43, Joey. Jolene, do you have a minute? I looked at my supervisor and nodded, placing the paperwork back into its folder, then into its file, then closed the cabinet. We stepped out of the records room, and I followed them down the hall to the emergency room, where my supervisor took me to one of the private rooms. There's someone asking for you to treat them. I blinked and tipped my head forward, looking through the little window and into the room. On the gurney was a large Asian man with a towel pressed to his face, but I knew who it was by the dragon tattoo which snaked up the side of his neck. You do know him? Yes, it's fine. He's a friend. I will see to him. My supervisor nodded and turned, leaving me alone, and I opened the door and stepped into the room. Aodo, are you okay? The big man, who had once almost stopped me from treating Alex, looked up and pulled the towel away a little. Fresh blood gushed from a wound on his face, and I grimaced. Let me guess, a run-in with another clan? He nodded, and I sighed. It was one thing I had learned about the Takata clan. Their soldiers got injured. A lot. Aoto would be the third clan member I had treated in the last week. Okay, give me a minute to stock my trolley. When was the last time you had a tetanus shot? He held up his free hand and bunching of his full fist at me. 20 years? Aoto nodded and I sighed. Okay, I'll give you one as well. Leaving the room, I walked down the corridor to the vaccine room and grabbed a tetanus booster, then went to the equipment room and grabbed some supplies. It looked like I was going to have to do some major stitching to Aoto's face and also somehow stop the bleeding. Grabbing everything I thought I would need, I left the room with the little trolley and headed back toward the room I'd left Aoto in. Hey, Joey. Peter, one of the male nurses, sided up to me. Need a hand. This guy, while reasonably nice, gave off major red flags. He was always asking me if I needed help, always trying to get into my space, asking me out for drinks. I looked at him, shaking my head as I continued to push the trolley. No, thank you. I'm fine. But I saw that guy. He's huge. What if he gets violent? I chuckled as I stopped outside the door to the room. The only person Aoto would hurt would be the one annoying the shit out of me. The clan knew I was to be protected. He won't hurt me. Peter screwed up his nose. How are you so sure? I smiled as I backed into the room, because I'm screwing his boss. The look on Peter's face as the door closed gave me such satisfaction, but I knew I probably shouldn't have said something like that. No doubt it would go around the hospital in no time, then I would be at the height of even more gossip. It was already bad enough that someone had started a rumor I was a lesbian because I hadn't spoken of a partner. I didn't have the energy to deny or affirm shit. Turning back to Aoto, I noticed the towel to his face was almost soaked through, and I donned gloves and an apron before stepping up to him. Are you ready for this? It's probably going to hurt like hell. I can give you a shot for the pain. I had made sure I'd grabbed some morphine for him, but Aoto shook his head and muttered, I'm fine. That was almost the most I'd heard from the big man, the whole time I'd been in New York, unlike Soda, who didn't shut up sometimes. Aoto didn't speak that much. Okay, let's see to that pretty face of yours. 15 minutes later, I was just starting the process of stitching, less when there was a knock at the door. I turned as Peter opened the door and popped his head through. Joey, there is a pair of men here for you, actually, for him. Is one of them older and the other younger and constantly looking around? Peter nodded, and I returned it. It's okay, show them through. There was no way I was going to stop Yuka and Alex from coming in to see Aoto. I turned back to Aoto and lifted the stitching needle. You ready? I have to go pretty close to your eye. He nodded, and I pursed my lips. Still no morphine? He nodded, and again I returned it, respectful of his wishes. The door opened behind me, and I turned my head as Alex showed Yuka into the room. Aoto tried to stand, knocking the trolley, and Yuka clucked his tongue. "Sit down, boy." He did, and Yuka walked over, smiling at me, as Alex closed the door. "Good afternoon, Jolene. Mr. Takada." I bowed my head. "I'm sorry, but I need to stitch Aoto's cheek." "Of course, continue." It was a bit more daunting, with both Yuka and the man I was sleeping with in the room. I didn't want to stuff things up. I sewed nice, neat stitches, making sure they were as even as possible before I tied off the last one. "There, let me clean it, then cover it, and he'll be right to go." Yuka nodded, leaning in to look at my handiwork as I turned and peeled the blood-soaked gown and gloves off. It was the first time I had looked at Alex properly since he had walked in with his boss. God, he was stunning. Alex smirked as he saw me watching him, and he winked. I poked my tongue out at him, and he raised an eyebrow, and I knew I would be in trouble when we got home. In the last month I'd been here, I'd learned that the more I was a brat to him, the more he liked it. It made our sex sessions phenomenal, and I wondered what I'd be in for later. "Jolene, my dear." I turned back to Yuka as I donned new gloves. He was looking at Aoto's huge wound, and I worried he'd found something wrong. "Sir?" Yuka stood straighter and smiled at me. "You are an incredible nurse, and our doctor is aging. Would you consider being his student, learning his trade, and becoming the clan's doctor?" I blinked and stared at Yuka for what seemed to be an eternity. "Excuse me?" Yuka chuckled and stepped closer. "You have once again showed your amazing skills, your softness, your ability to be compassionate. You have helped 3 of the clan this week alone, and they have said to others, if they get injured, to come to you." My stomach flipped, and I turned, looking at Alex. He smiled and nodded, as if telling me to take Yuka's offer. "And I will pay you more than what you would make in the hospital if you were to be a doctor." I looked back to Yuka, who smiled. "Plus, this is a way of you staying in New York with Alex." I turned to Alex, as his eyes went wide, and his face flushed red. "Sir." "Oh, come on, Alexander. Everyone knows you are together. This way you can start building something solid. Maybe one day you might be able to have a family." Alex's gaze shifted to mine, and my face heated. "A family? With Alex? Was he a family guy?" He didn't come across as a family man. Sure, he was sweet when he wanted to be, and he tolerated holding Oliver's son, Hero. But a family of his own? Alex's jaw clenched, and I turned, looking back to Yuka. "Wow, that is a lot to take in. May I think about it?" "Of course you can. Let me know when you have decided." Yuka stepped past me, his hand coming to my shoulder. "You are welcome in the Takada clan, even if things do not stay as they are." I turned and watched as he walked to Alex. "Come on, Alexander. We have meetings, and Aoto is in the best hands possible." "Sir?" Alex nodded, opening the door, and he threw one last look back to me as he walked Yuka out of the room, and with all the tension and confusion I saw in his features, it wouldn't be just the job offer from Yuka I would have to think about. 44 Alex. As we left Odo in the capable hands of Joey and drove away from the hospital, taking Yuka to the first of many meetings, only one thing was on my mind. Damn Yuka. I loved the man like a father, sometimes even more than my own. He had given Oliver and me one of the best lives anyone could ask for. He'd given us food, shelter, and a purpose. But what he had said in that hospital room about me settling down and practically forcing the subject of Joey and I was out of line, and I was livid. He didn't have the right to broach that with either of us. It was none of his business. Joey and I weren't a couple. We just fucked, all the time, like almost every damn day. Alex, I sense you are a little upset. Inhaling deeply, I looked at Soda before I turned in my chair and looked to the back of the car where Yuka was sitting. He put his phone down and looked at me. This calm, commanding man just stared right back at me, as if nothing in the world could faze him, and that made my blood boil even more. This could end badly, but right now, I didn't care. I was still pissed beyond belief, and I knew the words which came out of my mouth next would not be kind. "I have all the respect for you in the world, Yuka, but right now, fuck you." Yuka raised an eyebrow, and I heard Soda inhale sharply in the driver's seat. No one spoke to Yuka Takada like that and got away with it. You had no right to bring up the relationship between Jolene and me while trying to get her to work for you. And you could have given me a heads up about that too. Do you realize what you're asking of her? To work for the clan as a doctor, Joey would literally be pledging her life to it. She wouldn't be able to leave. She would know too much about the Takata clan and its members. Joey would become a liability if she was to ever be caught by another clan. Her freedoms would be eroded as well. She would have the same rules as I did when I traveled, having to ask permission from another clan to enter its territory. Not to mention she would be on 24-hour call, and if someone from the clan died while in her care. I shuddered to think of what would happen to the beautiful woman who shared my home. Yuka crossed his ankle over his knee and stared back at me calmly. I didn't know this would affect you as much as it did, Alexander. Inhaling, I turned back to the front of the car and crossed my arms over my chest. She is not built for this life, Yuka. She is capable, yes, but will she be able to handle clan life? I doubt it. I just wish you had spoken to me first. I would have told you as much, and then Joey would never have had to be put in the position she is in now. Yuka sat in silence in the back of the car for a moment before he replied. Alex, did you ever think she might be stronger than you're giving her credit for? Most people don't want to deal with the clan when they come into the hospitals. The only reason Auto went was because it was closer. He knew the risks, and he chose to be seen by her and not our clan doctor. Jolene is a bright, capable, strong, and beautiful young woman. The clan has come to respect and love her. My stomach sent up a multitude of butterflies as he spoke. I'd noticed this too. The soldiers had learned of her empathy, her compassion, her humor, and of how she had fixed my leg and apparently tamed me. When we went to the Jade Dragon for drinks, every single soldier of the Takata clan who was there, whether on duty or not, would go out of their way to say hello to her, and she didn't have to pay for a thing. And the list of soldiers lined up to be her driver, we still hadn't found one that would suit her, and Soda had been pulling double duties because they were all fighting over who got the honor of being her guard. And as for your relationship with her, well, everyone can see it bar you. She didn't stay here to make sure she could fix your injuries. She stayed because of you in general. Jolene is in love with you. Those butterflies turned to lead and plummeted to the base of my stomach. I turned and looked at Soda, who looked at me in return and raised an eyebrow, nodding. In love with me? How the fuck had I not noticed? I thought back to all the interactions we'd had over the last 2 months. The sex wasn't the most obvious part. There were the small gestures, the soft kisses. The meals were ready when I got home from work. Joey reached for me in the middle of the night, the relief on her face when she woke up and I was still next to her. Shit, I take your silence as understanding, Yuka said from behind me. I didn't confront you or throw your relationship at you. I just merely made you aware of her feelings. Maybe she's been too scared of the idea you've been using her, and you'll toss her to the side, like your brother did. That was probably exactly what the reason was. She'd already had her heart ripped out and trampled on by one Kazumi. Obviously, she didn't want the same thing to happen with another. I wouldn't do that, I muttered. Yuka's hand went to my shoulder, and I had to close my eyes to stop the tears. We know that, but she doesn't. Maybe it's time to have a chat with her, Alex. Because another thing everyone has noticed, you're in love with her too. 45, Joey. Drinks at the Dragon. It was at least a weekly thing we did. If not every couple of nights, depending on if Alex had meetings with Oliver. I didn't mind. It gave me a chance to talk to Jade, since her mom watched Hero every night while she worked. It also allowed me to mingle with the clan. I learned names and faces and personalities, who was more approachable than others and who to only say hi to. Good evening, Miss Brewster. I turned, looking at the young man who had come up to the side of me at the bar. Good evening, Naoki. Naoki was one of the sweetest young men I had met in the clan. He was a little taller than I was, strong and polite. Every time I was at the club, he would come and say hi. He was never rude and always had a smile on his face. How are you tonight? Very well, thank you, he replied, bowing slightly. You have done an amazing job on the wound on Mr. Tamashi's face. Ioto? Yes, he was a perfect patient, very still. It should heal very well with fine scarring. Naoki bowed. Well, do enjoy your evening, and if there is anything you need, please let me know. Thank you, Naoki, I replied, and he wandered off, leaving me on my own again. Oh, there you are, Jade sided up to me, bumping her shoulder against mine. I've been looking for you. I knew Alex was here, but you weren't with him. I turned my head and looked back to the table Alex and Oliver were sitting at. It was the center of the club, the boss's table. Usually I sat there with them, but tonight... Alex and I hadn't really spoken since the hospital. He'd texted me at about 3, asking if I wanted to go to the club tonight. When he and Soda had picked me up, he'd said, "Hi." But other than that, we'd been almost frost toward each other, and I knew it was because of what Yuka had said. Yeah, we're just giving each other some space at the moment. Oh, has this got anything to do with what Father offered? I turned back to Jade. You know? Oh, yes. Ollie and Alex spoke about it earlier. Sounded like Alex was absolutely pissed with the fact Father had offered the role to you. Frowning, I turned and looked back to Alex again. He was listening to something Oliver was saying, but he was watching me. I had always found Alex's attention intense. It literally felt like he was undressing me with his gaze, but right now it was like fire. There was something different about him, and I didn't know if it was a good thing or not. Joey? I looked back to Jade. Huh? Sorry. No, it's fine. It's a lot to think about. I understand. I once considered the role, but then I fell pregnant with Hiro, and Father wouldn't let me do it. He just tolerates me being at the club, only because they get a few hours with Hiro a couple nights a week. And it must be nice for you to have the break. Oh, you wouldn't believe how nice, she giggled. I love my boy with all my heart, but babies are intense. Plus, it gives Ollie and I time to spend together. I smiled, and Jade leaned in, giving me a quick one-armed hug. Give it some time. Have a good think about what your plans are. Then give Father an answer. Either way, he will be okay with your decision. He's not as stuck up as a lot of the other clan leaders. He's not going to have you hunted down because you said no. I laughed with her. Well, that's a good thing. Thanks, Jade. You're welcome. Now go and sit with your man. Oliver's wife wandered off, doing her manager duties, and I turned, looking back to the table Alex was sitting at. He was alone now. Oliver had left him to speak to some patron on the other side of the room, and he was still watching me. When he noticed me staring right back, he smirked and took a sip of his whiskey, giving me one of those panty-melting stares he did so well. I finished my drink and put the glass on the bar and walked over to him. What are you thinking about? I slid up to Alex, placing my arm around his shoulders, and he turned his head, slipping his arm around my waist, pulling me closer. His nose slid along the side of my neck as he lifted his head and nipped at my ear. Really want to know? I nodded as his hand slipped down, cupping my butt. He was such a hands-on guy, always wanting to touch me, needing to touch me. You sure? Alex, just tell me. He smirked and looked around the club. See all these private booths? I looked at the little curtained rooms dotted around the room. There were little tables and a small light on the outside of the room, which would flash, bringing a waitress to them. Other than that, they were private and no one disturbed who was inside. Yeah? Alex leaned in closer, his mouth going to my ear, his breath hot against my skin, as he gently squeezed my butt. I was thinking, if I took you into one of them, whether the music would be loud enough to drown out your moans as you grind your pussy on my thigh and make yourself come. My face burned with heat, and I closed my eyes, willing my body to behave. I'd never had someone like Alex in my life. Always horny, always wanting me. Alex gripped my earlobe with his teeth, tugging it gently, and I sighed, sagging against him. I turned my head, looking at him, before leaning in, whispering in his ear. You know how loud I am when I come. Do you think the music would be able to cover it? Alex chuckled, gripping my chin with his hand, and kissed me, his mouth hard on mine. His tongue dueled with mine, eliciting small gasps from me, and he pulled away, resting his head against mine. Nope, it wouldn't. But I'm done my meetings and Yuka's home safe. Let's go home so you can be as loud as you want. We left the club, and Soda took us home. The tension between us had eased into something a little more tangible, and I was glad. I didn't think I could have handled Alex being annoyed or pissed with me for the whole night. We waved to Soda as he drove off, and we let ourselves into the house, locking up behind us. I headed toward the stairs, but Alex grabbed my wrist. "Where are you going?" I looked at him. "Huh?" Alex walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa, looking up at me. He crooked a finger, and I walked toward him. His hand came out, grabbing just behind my knee, and he moved me to one side of him, then forward. I blinked, and he looked up at me. "I told you. I want you to make yourself come on my thigh." I looked down at the fabric on his dress pants before looking back to him. He was serious. Alex leaned forward and gripped the edge of my skirt, lifting it only enough for him to hook his fingers in the waistband of my panties and drag them down. I stepped out of them, and Alex tossed them to the side before grabbing my hips and guiding me down onto his thigh. I straddled it, my knees digging into the sofa, my left one tight against his crotch, and I could feel how hard he was. My hands went to his shoulders, my blunt nails digging in. My stomach clenched with need as the soft fabric pressed against my pussy and Alex's hands gripped my hips, gently pushing me back and then bringing me forward. "Move." I closed my eyes as the hardness of his thigh rubbed against my sensitive clit, shooting pleasure right through me. My rhythm was steady and Alex's hands left my hips. I heard the clanking of a belt buckle and opened my eyes as Alex slid his belt from his pants. I slowed almost to a stop, and his gaze lifted to mine. "Did I say you could stop?" My face heated, and I started to move again. Alex's hand traced up my thigh, across my belly, and up between my breasts until it wrapped gently around my throat. "Do you trust me?" I nodded, my pleasure building with his grip, and he pulled his hand away. "Stop." I blinked and stopped my movements, and he grabbed both my hands. "I'm going to tie these behind your back, okay?" I nodded, and with quick movements, Alex used his belt to secure my hands behind my back. "Not too tight? It's fine." His hands dropped to his shirt, unbuttoning it slowly, exposing hard, bronzed muscles, lined with tattoos. He looked up at me again, smirking as I bit my lip. "Like what you see?" I nodded as he pushed open his shirt, showing me his strong chest. All I wanted was to bite at his nipples because I knew it sent him crazy. Feeling is mutual. He breathed, his gaze lowering to where I sat on his thigh. Alex's hands went to his pants, and he undid the zip, shifting us just enough to push down his pants a little and expose his cock. Using one hand, he stroked himself, his own hips jerking slightly, and he looked up at me, his other hand going to my hip. "Start moving." I started to grind my hips again, and this time, probably because my hands were tied or Alex was stroking himself, the pleasure was more intense. "That's it. Fuck, you're so pretty, making a mess of my thigh." My head tipped back, a little moan escaping, and Alex groaned. "Fuck." I could feel my orgasm building, the tense coil in the pit of my stomach winding, and I knew it wouldn't take much for it to release. Alex's hand moved from my hip to my skirt, and he lifted it, exposing where I was grinding, to his gaze. I looked down at him as he stared, his hand working his cock faster, and I could feel his hips jerking their own rhythm. Neither of us were going to last much longer. Alex's dark gaze lifted to mine, and he licked his lips as his hand moved back to my hip, and he gripped it hard. "I can feel how wet you are. So fucking wet for me." His hand moved off my hip again, reaching up, and he pushed his thumb into my mouth, gripping the side of my neck with his huge hand. That was it. I couldn't hold it any longer, not with how primal this was. I orgasmed, the pleasure ripping through me, and my hips bucked as I ground on his thigh. His thumb left my mouth, swiping across my lower lip as I moaned his name. "Alex." "Fuck." His grunt was all I needed to know he was there with me, and I opened my eyes, looking down at him as thick ropes of cum spurt from his cock, landing on his abs. "Ah. Fuck." Alex's head was tipped back, his breathing harsh as he finished spurting, his hand slowing against his cock. He stopped, tilting his head back down, and smirked at me. I returned it, looking down at his abs again. "I'm not the only one to make a mess." He chuckled, reaching out to undo the belt, and my arms fell to the tops of his thighs as I rested. Alex's hand reached up, caressing the side of my face. "So fucking worth it. Watching you come has me all sorts of fucked up." My face heated again, and I stared down at Alex, not believing after 2 months of doing this, he was still as hot for me as he had been when we first slept together before Jake's wedding. In my mind, I had always been a passing fancy, and honestly, If he had said tomorrow that we were done with it, I would think I had a good run with him. About earlier. Alex shook his head. Not now, doll. Can we just have this and talk about it tomorrow? As long as we do talk about it, I replied, and he nodded, his hand rubbing my thigh. Yes, Joey, tomorrow we will talk about us. 46, Alex, U.S. What the fuck? Was there an us? I know there was Joey and I, fucking like rabbits at every chance we had. I couldn't get enough of her, and she seemed to feel the same, for as often as I started it, so did she. But was there us? As a couple? Could that happen? The alarm would go off soon. It was almost 8 in the morning, and Joey was curled up in my arms. Soon, we would get up, have breakfast, and then we would talk about us. The beeping to my left had Joey groan as I rolled to the side and pressed the button, silencing the alarm. Rolling back to her, I wrapped myself around her and she snuggled into my embrace. 10 more minutes, I chuckled, kissing the top of her hair. I wish, doll, but we have plans, remember? Joey looked up at me. We're really going to do it? Talk about us? Of course we are, but not before breakfast. I smiled, kissing the tip of her nose. I rolled to the side, leaving the bed, and went down to the kitchen. Putting the kettle on, I started to get things out of the refrigerator. Eggs, cheese, tomatoes, leftover smoked salmon. I would make us a delicious smoked salmon omelet with sourdough toast and... Alex! What, doll? I asked, smiling, as I turned. Joey was standing at the doorway of the kitchen, phone in her hand, and she was staring down at the screen, a worried look on her face. Joey? She looked up at me, her eyes wide, and my stomach dropped to my feet. Had something happened to her dad? She was close to him. I put the carton of eggs on the counter and went to her, taking the phone and reading the message. It was from a private number. I know you've been ignoring my other texts, Joey, but please don't ignore this one. I am sorry for what I might have done to have you so cold toward me. I need you. Please come back to Miami. I don't know where else to turn to. Jake, I stared at the message for a few moments before I looked at her and handed her back the phone. Fuck. So, he's your brother. And? As far as I was concerned, Jake was nothing but someone my mom pushed out. I had told Joey I didn't hate him, but I did. Don't you care about him? I didn't answer, and she blinked. I have to go back to him. The air left my lungs, and it felt as if she had driven a knife, with Jake's name on the blade, right through my heart. It took me a few moments to compose myself. After what we've had the last 2 months, you've got no problem in running back to Jake. The moment he puts on the waterworks? Joey lowered her gaze, her feet shuffling, and in that moment, although she looked incredibly vulnerable, I was beyond pissed. Jolene, you could at least look at me. Her bottom lip trembled, but finally Joey lifted her gaze and looked at me. He's my best friend, Alex. I sucked my tongue over my teeth and turned my head away, arms crossing over my chest as we stood in the kitchen doorway. I turned my attention back to Joey, who had lowered her gaze again, and my heart sank to my feet. There was no way I was going to be able to talk her out of this. She was going. I could see it in her stance, in the utter defeat she had in her body. Jake might have broken her heart when he'd married Phoebe, but he still seemed to hold the pieces of it captive, and I suddenly realized I was delusional if I thought she would ever have had feelings for me, no matter what other people saw. They were fucking blind, too. Fine. Go. I don't care. Those 5 words were the biggest lie I had ever told, and I felt sick as she flinched, and her shoulders slumped. Her eyes closed for a moment before they opened, and she lifted her gaze to me. Alex. I deadpanned her, my anger shining through my features, and she blinked, lowering her gaze again, and nodded. I'll pack my things. She turned and walked to the stairs, taking herself up to the bedroom, and I felt like the air had left the whole apartment. My first thought was to pick up the carton of eggs and hurl it against the wall, but instead, I went to the living room where I'd left my phone the night before and called Oliver. The big man picked up the phone on the first ring. A little early in the morning. How quickly can you organize a fight? The line went silent, and I pinched the bridge of my nose. Oliver. I'll see what I can do. Give me half an hour. The line clicked, and I dropped the phone back to the coffee table and turned. Joey was standing at the doorway of the kitchen, her hand wrapped around the handle of her suitcase. There was no way everything she had here would have fitted into that case. and that's when I realized she'd left the things I'd bought her here, as if she didn't want the reminder of what we'd had. I wanted to walk past her and hide in my office and not see her leave the house, but I knew I wouldn't be able to handle the knowledge she left, without having a chance to say goodbye, even if my heart was being broken in the process. Joey's gaze was on the floor, and I watched as a single tear rolled down her cheek and dropped off the side of her jaw and onto the fabric of the blouse she'd changed into. "I'm sorry." It took all my strength not to walk over to her and take the case and then shake some fucking sense into her. But I knew I wouldn't be able to, because of my brother, of what he still had. Pieces of her heart. The pieces needed to make it whole again and for her to be able to move on. "No, I am." Joey finally lifted her head and looked at me, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry I made the last 2 months of your life bearable. I'm sorry I gave everything to you." Joey's eyes closed, her bottom lip trembling, and I had to stop myself from dropping to my knees and begging her to stay. I wasn't going to come out of this in one piece. I was going to lose my mind, and she was going to rip my heart out of my chest and leave it in pieces on the floor, just as my brother had done to her. "You're going to go running back to Jake, and he's going to break your heart all over again." I walked over to her, stopping just shy of her, and reached out, tilting her chin up. Her eyes opened, and I stared down into the hazel orbs, filled with pain and sadness. "But do me a favor. Before you let him back in, ask him what happened to his nose when you were 12. Joey opened her mouth to reply, but I shook my head and pressed my finger against her lips. "Please, just do that for me, okay?" She nodded, and I smiled, leaning forward and pressing a kiss against her forehead, and it took all of my strength to pull away from her. "Goodbye, Jolene." I stepped past her and went up the stairs to the bedroom and closed the door behind me. Leaning against it, I slid down the wood until I was on the floor and brought my knees up to my chest. Wrapping my arms around my legs, I buried my head against my knees, and as I heard the door close to the house, which had started to feel like a home, I sat on my ass and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. 47. Joey. I was numb. Sitting in the back of the cab on the way to the airport, I felt as if the rug had been pulled from under me. Again. I couldn't believe I was doing this. Going back to Miami. Back to Jake, after what he had done to me. I was trading what I had with Alex for someone who thought of me almost as a possession. Even after the horrible phone call we'd had 2 months earlier, my brain kept telling me, as his best friend, I needed to be there for him. That was my job. I knew it was because of the years of conditioning he'd put me through, the narcissistic nature he had, and I didn't know how long, if ever, I would be free of it. But what made me really numb? Alex's reaction. He'd become so cold. He seemed to have no trouble in tossing the last 2 months into the trash, just like I thought he would. He'd told me to leave, and he didn't care. I was nothing to him but a bit of fun, an easy fuck, someone he could use, and flaunt around until it suited him. Fuck him. He was just as bad as his brother, if not worse. At least I knew exactly where I stood with Jake. I was his best friend. With Alex, I was nobody. The cab pulled up to the airport, and I paid the driver and got out. Walking into the terminal, I managed to find someone to help me get a flight to Miami, and then went and found somewhere to sit while I waited. I secluded myself in a corner of the airport, near my gate, and bought out my phone, checking it. Another message from Jake. "Please, Joey, let me know if you're getting these. I need you." I snorted and almost sent back an "fuck you," but didn't. Instead, I sent him a message. It was short, not giving him too much information. "I will come back to Miami and help you, however I can. I will let you know where I am staying when I get back." It took a few moments, but there was a reply. "Thank you." I didn't reply to him, but sat and thought about what a sad turn my life had taken. Even sadder than when Jake had married Phoebe. I was happy with Alex. We laughed and loved and talked about everything from our childhoods to something funny Soda had done the week before, and I was about to toss that all away to go back to the guy who always put me at the bottom of his list. I was fucking nuts. I had to be doing this. On more than one occasion, I found myself standing to walk out of the airport and go back to Alex, but I'd stopped when I remembered how cold he'd been, how indifferent, and if not a little angry with me, and I would go back to my seat and wait, fighting back tears in the process. After trying to pass the time for close to 4 hours and with my nerves in tatters, I finally boarded my flight. Sitting in the seat, I looked out the window as the plane taxied its way down the runway. This was it. There was no turning back now, and I highly doubted I would be looking at the New York skyline again. Not when it reminded me of what I had just walked away from. Shutting down the blind, I pulled out a pair of earbuds and put some soft music on, and closed my eyes, and before too long I drifted off to sleep. 3 hours later, I was leaving the plane and stepping into the heat of Miami. Moving through the terminal, I collected my solitary suitcase and headed to the taxi ranks. My first thought was to just go straight to Ma and Pa Kazumi's house and see if Jake was there. But I didn't want to just show up in case it was something they didn't know about. So instead, I got the cab driver to take me to a hotel, any hotel he thought would be suitable for a couple nights' stay. As we pulled up, I paid and climbed out, looking up at the building. It was the same one Alex had stayed in. "You have to be kidding me," I muttered as the cabbie handed me my luggage and left me standing in front of the hotel. Karma is a bitch. I could turn around and go to another hotel, but honestly, I was dog-tired and just wanted to lay down. Sighing, I walked into the hotel and booked a room. Thankfully, the room which Alex had stayed in wasn't the one they gave me, and I took my suitcase up. Falling onto the bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what was going to happen next. If Jake was actually okay, and this had been a ploy to get me back under his thumb, would I stay? If Jake wasn't okay, would I stay? In the end, the question was, would I stay? Well, I couldn't go back to New York. Not now. Not after the shit show that was this morning, because I knew if I turned up on Alex's doorstep, he'd probably slam the door in my face and then call Soda to escort me off the property. I fished my phone out of my pocket and opened the texts, hoping to see one from Alex with an apology or asking me to come back. There wasn't any, other than the one from yesterday asking if I wanted to go to the Dragon for drinks, and I frowned. I wouldn't be surprised if by now he had wiped my number from his phone. Closing out of those texts, I opened the ones from Jake and quickly typed him a message. "Have checked into a hotel for the night. I will message you with the room number and which one tomorrow. I need some time to get over the flight." If he was any kind of friend, he would understand, and I almost dreaded the reply. It was a simple K, and I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Tossing it to the side, I stood and went and showered. Feeling a little more human, I called down for room service and started to search the TV for something to watch. I needed the distraction before I went back to the airport. 48. Alex. Soda found me sitting on the floor of the bedroom, back against the windowsill, staring at Joey's side of the bed. It was still rumpled from where she'd slept in it the night before. There were still some of the clothes, thrown over the chair in the corner, some of her makeup in the bathroom, and a bottle of her perfume on the bedside table. "Alex?" I didn't look up as he stepped into the room. "Alex, Oliver sent me to check on you." This time I did look up. Soda frowned and walked over to me, crouching in front of me. "Where is Jolene?" "With Jake." Those 2 words had my bottom lip trembling, and I closed my eyes, trying to stop myself from crying. Again. I'd bawled like a fucking baby for the last 5 hours, ignoring my phone, which was why Soda would be in front of me right now. "She went back to Miami, to my brother." The big man sighed, and I opened my eyes and looked at him. He'd be able to see how red my eyes were, how defeated I looked. "Did Olive organize a fight?" Soda nodded. "The only one who would, though, is Reiji." Crap. Reiji was one of my sparring partners when I trained for the annual fight. He was quick and good at the best of times. I knew he would kick my ass because I wouldn't have my head in the game. "Fine, what time?" "Alex, are you sure you want to do this? You're not—" "Soda, what time?" I asked again, and he frowned. 6. "Good. Let me go and have a shower, then we will go." I struggled to my feet, slapping Soda's hand out of the way when he tried to help, and walked toward the bathroom. I stopped just shy of it and turned, looking at the things on Joey's side of the bed, before turning back to Soda. "Can you go down to the utility room and find a box? I want to put all Joey's things in it." Soda opened his mouth to reply, but shut it quickly and nodded as I disappeared into the bathroom and closed the door behind me. If she was determined not to come back, then there was no point in holding on to her things. I'd donate what I could and throw the rest. Throwing on the taps, I stripped off and climbed into the almost scalding water and quickly scrubbed myself, rubbing the sea sponge over my skin, probably a little too hard. Not that the pain did a damn thing for the thoughts running through my head. When my skin was stinging and almost red raw, I turned off the taps and climbed out, wrapping a towel around my waist and leaning against the vanity, staring at myself in the mirror. What more could I have possibly given her? What was it that made it so hard for her to stay? Was it the tattoos? No, she had been fascinated by them and had often lay in my arms, tracing the outlines of them or telling me what one I should get in which spot, until she fell asleep. Was it my age? I was 9 years older than she was, but it had never come up in any of the conversations we had. It wasn't you, I muttered, staring at myself. It was your asshole brother. Mother's baby. The golden child. The wanker who had stolen away the woman I had started to consider building a life with. And it was her. Jolene Brewster was still conditioned to Jake, to his cries of help, his pleading and promises of being the savior in her life, of being the only one she needed. He'd been doing it for so long, she didn't know any difference, and she would always go back to him. Fuck. My head lowered, and I gripped the side of the vanity, trying to stop the need to smash my hand into the mirror. I was stronger than this. But there's never been anyone like her. I muttered to myself and knew after this, even if it was years after Joey left, I would never be able to give myself to a woman like I had with her. I would go back to how I had been. Sleeping with a woman, then moving on to the next, because it was the easier thing to do. I didn't want attachments. I didn't want love. That shit just left you broken and used. The love I had from my parents was a prime example. No matter what I gave, I was still just second to Jake and always would be. What was the point? A knock on the bathroom door and I sighed, turning my head. Yeah, I'll be out in a minute. I was grateful Soda was there. I had started to dip into blackness, and he had managed to pull me out. Opening the door, I walked out into the room to see the box on the floor at the end of the bed and the bedroom door closed. I blinked and walked to it, looking into its depths. This was where everything of Joey's would go, but not right now. Turning away from it, I walked to my wardrobe and opened it, pulling out sweatpants and a muscle shirt. Dressing, I tossed the towel into the bathroom and picked up my pair of trainers and some socks and made my way downstairs. Soda was waiting by the door, and I grabbed the keys to the house and we left. Driving to the club, we didn't speak, and I was grateful for that. I didn't want to talk about it. Maybe one day I might open up about the beautiful woman who had tamed me, then slain me, but it wouldn't be right now. Arriving at the rear of the club, I walked into the back and greeted Reiji. "Are you sure you want this?" he asked, frowning. "Just get in the ring, Reiji." I spat, stripping off my shoes and shirt, tossing them to the side as I climbed into the makeshift ring used for underground fighting. "Let's get this over and done with." Reiji nodded and joined me, and with the first fist blow to my cheekbone, I almost forgot about the last 2 months with Joey. 49.